Greetings, ladies and laddies, and welcome back to the realms of a cursed city. Today we are going to paint the elegant nobleman and hero Glaurio van Alten. Like most other cursed city miniatures, his cast is of exquisite delicacy, featuring a dynamic pose and an epic amount of details to get lost in. As much as I'm excited to finally be able to paint him, I'm no less intimidated by this model. Just as some of you may be too. But I have a plan on how to tackle him. So ready your paints, pick up your brushes, and without further delay, let's get going. When tackling such a detailed model, it's pretty natural to not immediately know where to start. What I do in those situations is to look for things that are very messy to do, or that are below most other parts and therefore hard to reach. With Glaurio, I decided to start with his brigandine, taking a pale brown to catch all parts of the leather that the metal plates were riveted on. Then we take care of the armor right away, using a dark true metallic silver to carefully catch the plates on his skirt, and then move on with his harness and the big pauldron on his shoulder. He also carries a mirror with him, to always make sure of the flawless form of his glorious moustache. Okay, armor done, and I already don't know where to continue. I think the wisest course of action would be to start at the bottom and work our way up from there. So, we take a dark grey with a slight tint of blue to it, and paint his large boots. After that, it gets a lot brighter, as we take a bright orange for his trousers, and then a very bright yellow for the fabric belt around his waist. This yellow, just like most bright colors painted over a dark primer, wasn't opaque enough with one coat as you can see here, so we just need to lay out multiple coats to cover it up nicely. After the belt, we take a bit of beige to paint the fur that frames his armored skirt. We don't want to paint the rest of the fur just yet, so after we're done with this first bit, we take a rich brown to pick out his leather belts. We can also use this brown for the sheath of his saber. Okay, now it gets a little more exciting. Taking a rich bordeaux, we paint his very cool jacket that he wears like a cape around his shoulders. Then we take a pale orange for its trim, and lastly the beige from before again to paint all the rest of the fur. For the cool cords that go along his harness, we pick the bright yellow again. And for his shirt that's just barely visible, we pick a pure white. After that, we take a pale khaki for the glove on his right hand, instead of a dark grey as it is the case in GW's color scheme. Then we take a rosy terracotta to pick out his skin, which doesn't only mean his face, but also his left hand on his saber. Now it's time to paint his lush stache, for which I'll use a blue tinted medium dark grey, but you can of course use any hair color that you like. Glaurio, as the last member of the Van Alten dynasty, has of course a lot of expensive jewelry on him. For all of these, we take a true metallic gold, and pick out the buttons on his jacket, the ornaments on his pauldron, the grip of his saber, and the many rings he's wearing on both hands. Very close to the finishing line, we only have his pistol left to paint, for which case I take a jade green. After that, we pick out the gun barrel as well as many other parts with a true metallic silver, and finish it up by painting the firing mechanism with a true metallic gold. For the mirror I wanted to use gold too, but I saw that it was white in the original, which I thought to be a very clever choice. And just like that, all base colors are now applied and every part of the mini is painted. The colors are looking very flat for now though, making the whole miniature lack depth and lighting. So we take a big brush, load it up with black wash, and just slop it on the mini. Be quick when doing this, especially when covering the back, to prevent type marks from building up. Just make sure that every bit has some wash on it, and if it pools too much in some areas, just keep brushing to spread it out to your liking. While we leave the wash to dry, we can use the time efficiently and paint up Glaurio's base, laying the foundation with Citadel's texture paint Stirland Mud. After that, we randomly dab a bit of mustard yellow onto the ground, dry brush the whole thing over with a light beige to make the texture stand out, paint the cobblestones to match the cursed city field cards, and finish it up by painting the trims in a smooth pitch black. Now that everything is thoroughly dry, Glaurio van Alten III is fully painted up to a game and table ready standard. I think that starting from the bottom and just working our way up was a smart move in this case. It might have not been the most efficient strategy, but for a model with this many details I think it's important to set yourself an easy guideline you just have to follow. Otherwise one could forget some things, spend more time thinking about the next step than actually doing it, or just be too intimidated to even start. So if you're ever brushed to face with a model like this, be it a mini with many details or just lots and lots of parts, just start from the bottom and take it one thing at a time. No worries, you got this. The speed painting part is basically over, and we could definitely call it a day on our model at this point. But as always, I would like to use the next few minutes to show you guys a few more, slightly more tedious extra steps to even further upgrade this already awesome looking mini. First, we turn our attention to the armor again. Using a bright silver, we give the armor more highlights by picking out all the spots that reflect the most light. These are quite obvious for the most part, but it gets a bit harder on the armored skirt. Here we pick out the small rivets, the left edge and the middle of each plate, forming the highlight in this kind of V shape. While we have it out anyway, we can also polish the mirror again. After that, we do the same with a bright true metallic gold on all the golden parts, again catching all the most reflective areas, just like we did with the silver before. Coming back to his really cool jacket, we want to intensify the depth and structure of the folds. For this, we can just take the same Bordeaux as for the base coat, as the first layer has been dulled down by the wash so much, and apply it on all the raised areas, but leave the wash in the recesses untouched. We then do basically the same thing again, using a brighter red this time and only paint the very top of the raised areas, without obstructing too much of the previous Bordeaux. The result looks very cool, and you could definitely keep adding layers like a pale orange, but for me, I'm absolutely satisfied with how it looks now. After the jacket, we take a very light khaki to highlight the yellow fabric belt around his waist, which really helps to knock down the bright yellow. We can use the same color to highlight his glove, but more than that, we want to use it to highlight his fur. Yep, every single strand of hair that's visible from the sides or from above gets their own distinctive highlight. And nope, dry brushing is no option this time. This definitely takes the other minute or two, so maybe save this step for a rainy afternoon, with a cup of tea on your side and your favorite ASMR on your ears. Just relax and take it easy, alright? Sure, it's tedious, but also quite enjoyable, I'd say, and the results are definitely worth it. This also reminds me of the unique Elder we painted a few months back, where I had to pick out every single scale of the hand-sculpted skirt. Anyone remember that one? Believe it or not, eventually we got the fur done, and the next thing we want to do is to paint the sharp folds of the edges of Glaurio's boots with a light blue tinted grey. Then we touch up his trousers with a little bit of pale orange, and reinforce the white on his shirt and mirror. Finally, we come to his skin. Here we start by taking the same paint we used for the base coat again, and pick out all the details where the wash didn't really take foot in the first place. Then we take an even brighter tone of that color and switch to a finer brush to repeat this step all over again. But this time we only want to stick to the details and most prominent parts. For example, the tip of his nose, the top of his cheek, and so on. With this we have already achieved a lot of depth on this small head, and it looks just great. The only thing left to do are his eyes, and because this is a really delicate procedure, I couldn't possibly do it with the camera direct in front of me. If this step is nothing for you, you can of course skip it and just leave the eyes dark. The mini definitely looks great even without it. I'm quite content with how they turned out this time, but I'm even more happy to say that this step concludes the paint job, and Glaurio is finally done. Glaurio van Alten III, last surviving member of his aristocratic dynasty, determined to throw the usurper Raduca off his throne and take revenge in the name of his family, is finally done. Now, as challenging as this mini might have been with all of its details and different textures, I can wholeheartedly say that Glaurio was probably the most fun to paint of all the heroes so far, which is why I'd like to encourage you to give it a go yourself, and not be intimidated by his cast. In general, for all those of you who are watching this without having purchased the Cursed City box set, I'm absolutely convinced that there's no miniature that you, yes you specifically, cannot paint. There's no such thing as too many details or too many parts. If you tackle one thing at a time and don't get lost in thinking about what comes next, you will get it done. And as long as you're having a good time doing it, the result will look great. If you're following me along on this project with your own miniatures at home, you will have 5 out of 8 Heroes of the Cursed City box set finished. In the previous videos I always said 9 heroes in total, because I'm an idiot and cannot count the minis I have on my desk for months. As always, I have a full guide listing the exact paints that I used for this paint job down in the description of the video. And should you have any questions, maybe a couple of suggestions, be my guest and share them in the comment section. With Glaurio, all of the, more or less, human characters are finished. And even though humans really are jacks of all trades, quests like these do tend to take a little bit of otherworldly finesse. In the next episode of our speed painting series, we're going to paint the wood elven archer Kulathis the Exile. And if you would like to see her paint job, as well as the other upcoming heroes of the Cursed City box set, feel free to hit the subscribe button. As I am really looking forward to seeing you again in my next video. Until then, take care.